My name is Claire. My name is Claire Schneider, and I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico in the US, where I have a small English language school called Language Matters. Like you, I'm a volunteer with a buddy whom I meet online once a week to practice conversational skills. I used to work at the Santa Fe Community College, where I taught English to immigrants, and I currently serve on our local chapter of TESOL. Engine wanted to offer the webinar this month at a different time, as well as their regular times. They wanted to add this time to see if it would increase attendance. And I was more than happy to collaborate with Margarita and would like to thank her for putting it all together, including the wonderful slides. Margarita is actually joining us in the background tonight from Ukraine. As we know, it's in the middle of the night there. So I'm really grateful to her for taking care of the technical aspects of this. So in this training, you will learn about effective pronunciation techniques. We will focus on the most important needs of Ukrainian speakers of English and the major differences to bear in mind in the phonological structure of English and Ukrainian that will help you know what to focus on with your buddy. So before we begin, let me tell you about a few important rules for our work today. Please put yourselves on mute unless you're speaking. Also, I wanted to let you know, and you may have seen a pop-up, that the webinar will be recorded. If you're not comfortable with that, please turn off your camera. We plan to have a 10-minute Q&A session at the end. So please keep your questions in mind for the end, or you can write them in the chat box along the way. If you have any questions or comments and you want to reach Margarita, who is in charge of curriculum for Engine, you can email her at that address. And then if you would be so kind as to fill out the feedback form after the training, it really helps Engine with their future planning as they, really are trying to prepare the best resources for all of us moving forward. And it only takes a minute or two. So I hope you can do that afterwards. Okay, so we've already written in the chat, we've got a lot of a nice broad range of locations that you're all in. And we're going to move on to the next slide. So we're going to look at the differences and similarities really briefly between accent and pronunciation. So pronunciation is linked to other oral skills, both influencing intelligibility and fluency. So this slide shows succinctly how they vary, but of course, we know that they're very closely related as well. So if someone's accent is just too strong, or it varies significantly from the norm of a certain area, it might be difficult for people to understand this. And I encountered this to some extent when I moved to the US 21 years ago. I had to change the way I pronounce certain words, including my name, so that it was easier for people to understand me. But put in a simple way, accent goes more with a certain region, and it's the rhythm and melody of the language is really important. And pronunciation focuses more on the actual articulation of syllables and sounds. So there's a popular misconception among learners that if you are not pronouncing a word the way it should be pronounced, then you are speaking a language incorrectly. So we should explain to our learners that accent is part of our identity, who they are, part of what gives them a unique character and makes them interesting to others. They can also improve their pronunciation through practice, but shouldn't try to suppress the accent completely. I don't know if any of your buddies have said that, they want to sound like a native speaker, but really that shouldn't be our goal. Our goal should be to help them pronounce clearly enough that most people will understand what they're saying. So you may have noticed already in your work with your Ukrainian student or buddy that they tend to experience certain challenges. If you'd like to write in the chat any of those that you have noticed so far, that could be interesting for others to see. I'll just give you a moment to do that. Here we have Monica, T and D. Yes, wide and white, exactly. Yes, TH sound. Yes, I've noticed that. My buddy sometimes she might say something instead of something. And why? Yeah, we're going to talk more about some of these things. Z. Yes. So we're already starting to see some patterns where we're experiencing similar things. Great. Trial, yes, that would be a diphthong. So diphthongs are extremely difficult. Consonants are soft, endings of words, perhaps like missing, not including the endings of words, perhaps you mean, Carol, or just mispronouncing. Gerunds, yes. Fantastic. Thanks for all your contributions. Okay. So moving on to our next slide. So this is a fairly dense slide. And what I'd like to say before showing you the next few slides is that there are a lot of wonderful resources coming up and links that Margarita has included. So hopefully you can take the time in the future to come back to the slides because you will have a copy of them and to really investigate these resources. It's difficult for us to open them in this format, but they really are wonderful. And I hope that you have time to do that. So looking at the first one with the long, short vowels. So these are going to be very difficult for Ukrainians because they don't differentiate between these two. So for example, the difference between beat and bit, sport and spot, pool and pull, etc. And we're going to talk more about these, what we call minimal pairs, later on in the session. But these can be challenging. I'm sure you've noticed this quite a bit with your learners. So, we can model the correct pronunciation. We can get them to repeat it. We can use even a rubber band like this. If it's a longer word, we can get them to do this, beat, and then bit, beat, bit. It's a very simple tactile thing to do, and that might be helpful for them. And then the second thing I'd like to talk about are the some other comparable sounds. For instance, the difference between work and walk. And so there's some activities we can give them where we can give them a list of words and we get them to identify the word that has a sound in it that's different. So for example, we have thirsty, dirty, 13, and tired. So since we're all fluent speakers, that would be easy for us to identify. But for someone who's learning English, they may get influenced by the spelling if they see it written and think it should be that the tired would be tired, just like 13. So it can be very confusing for students. And then diphthongs are also very difficult because in Ukrainian, they don't have diphthongs. So words like phone, goat, tone, I also refer these to as moving vowels where we actually are combining different vowels to make a new sound. They don't have these. So it can be really difficult for them. So this is on the slide here, this is an example of where they could choose the words that should go, say, next to chair, and just write them or say them, and same with ear. So they would look for beer and here. And again, the spelling can be quite confusing, but we need to emphasize that they need to focus on the sounds and not the spelling when they look at words like this. So the last part of this slide is to do with the sounds of the a sound. Usually Ukrainians will pronounce that as eh. So this is very challenging. They'll see these letters and they may produce the sound the same. So they may say, instead of mat, they may say met. Instead of bad, they may say bed. And so this is very typical because they don't have that a sound in their language. They will subconsciously almost replace it with the closest familiar sound. And so obviously it can make a big difference to the meaning, and that's what sometimes happens in these kinds of situations. All right, moving on to the next slide. Now we're going to spend a minute or two just looking at consonant sounds. So in Ukrainian, the sounds like pa, ka, and ta are not aspirated. Aspirated meaning we use some force when we use those sounds in English. They don't have this in Ukrainian. And so instead of the word, say, lap, it might come out and sound like lab. And set might sound like said. Some of you in the comments have already noted this, and you've noticed this in your work with your buddy. So we can do some fun things with them, like this kind of rhyme or riddle, tongue twister, really they are. These are really fun to do with learners, and we're going to look at more of these later. And this is one that probably many of you know. I certainly grew up with this one. And, you know, first you get them to say it slowly, or maybe you'll read it with them if they need to, you know, if they don't feel confident just reading it themselves. And then you can get them to say it a little faster. Then also the th sound and the v sound over here, the middle section. So sin might come out as thin and useful as youthful. So these are really tricky. And here's another little tongue twister, and also a resource underneath that has many, many more. So these clothes are rather for the southern weather. Those clothes are rather for the northern weather. So even we might have trouble reading that, especially if we speed up, right? Then, as some of you also noted in the chat box, the v and the w sound. So apparently Ukrainian doesn't contain a clear distinction between these two. So they're often confused when they pronounce these words. So we might hear vot for what or ven for when. So we can do some activities with them where we really encourage them to focus on the articulation, you know, what's happening in the mouth with the lips, where do the lip, you know, how do we position them in order to make these sounds? And so with practice, you know, they can obviously improve. Once they're made aware of these sounds, they can practice them to make changes. Right, moving on to the next slide. Okay, this is something we refer to in English as the nasal as in the ng at the end of words. So, so for Ukrainian learners, they might say it as ing, so the G is sort of hardened, or they might just say in, while forgetting or not knowing that it's really ing. So it's quite tricky with the position of the tongue, and that's something they can practice too. And there are many videos. I will share a resource with you later where they can watch and practice even on their own time or during their time with you to really get the articulation correct so that they can produce this sound. And here's some examples. Singing, dancing, you've probably noticed that as well when you've had your sessions. Plenty more resources down below. So moving on to the dark and light L. So this is something that is very typical with English, where we have these two kinds of L sounds. So it's very common to have the L at the beginning of a word, as in light, language, lift and loaf. But then there's another kind of la that we produce more in the back of our mouth, as in world. And if you want to just go ahead and say that, everyone's muted so that you can sort of notice the difference. Or you can say lift and world. And you'll notice that it's produced in a very different way. And as someone who grew up speaking English, I was not aware of this until I became a teacher and I really started studying and focusing on things like this. So you might want to just try that and notice that difference. And something that's interesting to know too is that for Ukrainian speakers, they actually find the dark one easier to produce. So they may use that in place of the light one at the beginning of a word. And so it might come out as incorrect or inaccurate pronunciation because that's the L sound that they're used to producing. Here's another little riddle. It's just fun to use with them and some more resources. So as you probably are aware, there's so many aspects to pronunciation. And we need to draw our learners' attention to all these aspects. So the individual sounds they're having difficulty with, word and phrase, sentence stress, and intonation, as well as rhythm and rhyme, and the melodic aspects of English. We don't have time to do all that today. And so we're focusing on the first part, the individual sounds. So now I'd like you to think a little bit about the ways that you're using the things that you're doing now with your learners to help them with pronunciation. Because as you'll see from this presentation, and really we're only touching the tip of the iceberg, there's so many activities we can do with them, and there's so many ways to approach it. But what are you doing right now? And I'd like you to think of at least 3 ways, or maybe even a few more, in breakout rooms. You can have a discussion with other other people who are, we're all doing the same thing, other volunteers, and share ideas. I often learn the most during these kinds of webinars from the other people who are participating. So I hope you enjoy this 10-minute breakout session, and we will bring you back in about 10 minutes. So just take a moment for Margarita to set those up for us. Welcome back, everybody. If we have time at the end, we can share a little bit about what you talked about. But I think for now, we're going to go ahead and just get through all the other slides and see what our timing looks like at the end. So I hope you enjoyed that session and were able to share with each other. All right. Actually, it looks like I need to just catch up a little bit on my side. So we have prepared about a dozen or so activities that you could try with your buddy. And, there are quite a few, and this is just, a tiny sampling. There are really just so many things out there online, many, many free resources. So I would suggest that you, look through these with me, and hopefully 1 or 2 will sort of, spark some interest where you think, well, that sounds cool. I'd like to try that. And then you can click on the links later if there are those provided to get more ideas. And I often do that with my buddy. I'll even say sometimes, oh, I'm going to try something new today, and let's try this activity. And then I ask, how did you like that? What did you think of that? And that helps guide me with future sessions. So the first one we're going to look at is called Odd One Out. I think that the title is pretty self-explanatory. So we'll get our learner to read the words in each line and they'll have to identify which one sounds different. So this is really good for developing their phonological awareness. If they're lower level learners, you can read these words for them and tell them, you know, we're practicing sounds. Don't focus too on the spelling, just focus on what it sounds like and listen to it and which one sounds different. So we have hi, we have day, my, and nice. And so obviously we want them to identify that day is the odd one out. And there's some other examples here. So moving on to the next one. This is something I do a lot with my buddy and my students. It's fairly easy to do. And once they get the hang of it, you can use this with all different kinds of minimal pair activities. Minimal pair meaning where the words are really similar, but they differ with one phonological element. One sound is going to be different, but it can really make a huge difference. So whether someone says leave, long leave versus live, obviously it has a completely different meaning. So I usually will say a word, one of these 10 words. So let's say I say feet, and they have to listen. And if they hear feet, then they're going to hold up one finger. But perhaps they might hear fit, in which case they'll hold up two fingers. After they hold up their fingers, I hold up my finger so that they know if they're correct. So if, for instance, it would go like this. I'll say feet, and my buddy will say, and I not say, will hold up one finger, and then I will hold up one finger. And I'll do another one. Let's say I say pill, buddy, me, or I might say ship, buddy. And so the buddy can see that that's incorrect. Once they really get the hang of this and they have a high accuracy rate, I know that they have the phonological awareness, the ability to hear the difference, because not all learners can hear that right away. It's not necessarily easy. Even my Spanish students will have a hard time with this. But once they seem to get the hang of it, and I know that they can hear the difference, then we reverse roles and I ask the learner to be the one to choose a word. So the buddy will say, let's say the buddy will say the word ship, and I listen, and if I hear ship, I hold up two fingers, and then my buddy will hold up two fingers. So I know it's correct, and that means she said it accurately enough that I determined it was ship. And then he might say peel. Now hold up one finger, buddy will hold up one finger. We know it's the same. Or you could get them to give some verbal indication that it's in column 1 or 2. I just like using fingers sometimes for a change. This is also where you can use the rubber band for them to practice with something more tactile. Sheep and ship, feet and fit. And it's just another way for them to try to access this and practice. Right, moving on. So the color vowel chart is a method that I use. It's very central to all my programs. All my students use this. I actually do not use the International Phonetic Alphabet. I was very happy to abandon that a long time ago, and so are my students. So I use this color vowel chart. And the premise of this chart is that if we mispronounce the main stress in a word, it makes it difficult for people to understand us. So for instance, in the word that has 3 syllables, potato, we don't say potato, we do say potato, and we don't say potato. So English is a stress time language, unlike many other languages. And there's going to be one main vowel sound that is going to be the most important. And so this method really focuses on that. If you want to learn more about this method, you can click on this link and it'll take you to the chart where you can click on any of these colors and it'll produce the sound. So for instance, if you click on black cat, it will say black cat, ah. And this method goes a lot with this open hand technique, which you can find out more about on their website. And this helps, this also was tactile, kinesthetic, and it helps the learner know how long to spend on that black cat sound. It's not too short. So this is the American English version. There is a Commonwealth version as well. I use the American one. And I focus especially on the vowel sounds that are specific to American English. So, you know, we don't say, I can't speak Ukrainian. We say, I can't speak Ukrainian. Black cat, can't. Olive sock is another one. Olive sock, ah, call it the doctor sound. This is very tricky for learners of English because they really have to learn to drop their jaw to produce that sound. And the other one that is very important is in American English is purple shirt. So when I first came to the US and I said my name, Claire, people didn't understand me. When I spelled it, they said, oh, Claire. So now I say it like that. I have to use a little bit more of the R sound at the end, and then it's easier for people to understand me. And then also orange door, which is more common in the western part of the United States. On the eastern side, it's more Auburn dog, which is a little bit more British. So anyway, it's a very interesting method and very powerful. There's actually also an app that goes with that. All right, moving on. Detecting a word. So as the teacher, you can read some sentences and get your buddy to say or circle the word that they hear. You know, are you saying washing or watching? Shops or chops? So this is also, these are also minimal pairs, another activity. This is really fun, and I learned when we were working on this presentation that you can get a virtual die online. I usually just had one next to my computer that I would just throw. But anyway, these games are amazing. The buddy will, you know, use the virtual die, and then depending on what sound he or she lands on, can make some words with that sound. That in this case, these are single consonant sounds, but there are other games where that might be a blend, like instead of just p, it could be pl, pl, and then they'll have to think of words like, you know, play and pleasure, etc. So games are always popular, I think, no matter how old we are. It's a great way to learn. Okay, next one, more games. There are plenty of mazes online where your buddy will start, let's say, at easy, and have to figure out how to get to leave using the same sound. That would be an E sound, long vowel sound E, or in color vowel language, green T, E. So they go easy, C, etc., weaving their way all through here until they get to leave. Pronunciation pyramid is another variation where they'll start at the top and you will say the word below, choose one of the words below, and they'll circle it, or they'll just remember it. And then at the end, you'll see if they've ended up in the correct place with the correct word at the bottom. Okay, rhymes. These are really fun. You can get them to think of words that go in each one of these sections. Or you could give them a list of words and they could place them in one of these quadrants, one of these 4 quadrants. When I saw this chart, I also thought that I would probably use it as say a warm-up activity. You could say, you know, we're working on the green TE today. Those are words that sound like free. I'm going to time you for 1 minute. Can you think of How many words can you think of for 1 minute? Some students like this, just sort of gamifying a little bit, and it seems a little bit more competitive. And then they write down as many words they can think of with free. So that's just a fun variation of this. And then they also get to collect words that sound the same, and they can go back and practice those. They'll start to notice that some of them have different spellings, even though they sound the same. And that is something that they also will notice if you introduce them to the color vowel chart. It helps with spelling over time. All right, moving on. Okay, we have some resources here for you. The Sounds American channel is fantastic. There will be every sound and every combination of sounds that we have in English. This link is a direct link to how to say the 100 top or 100 most common companies, US companies or something like that. And there's a period when they sort of give instruction, and then they'll say certain sounds, and the student or the learner can repeat. There isn't an artificial intelligence component to this, where so they won't get corrected. But if you do it with them, you can work with them and help them make the corrections. I'm not so familiar with the John's English word, but that's another one that Margarita added, so I'm sure it's a great resource. And Youglish is really fun. I don't know if any of you have come across this, but it's another free site. You type in a word, let's say you type in, I typed in courage today. And you'll see clips, say from a movie or a TED talk. So it's authentic text, and you'll hear someone saying that word courage. The first one actually was someone British, so she said it more like courage. And then it was followed by several examples of Americans saying it more like courage. It's really a fantastic site and a lot of fun to use in your sessions. This is another variation where you'll read one of the sentences, and the buddy will listen and circle or say, oh, I heard you say, may the 4th be with you. And so it's B, not A. Okay, moving on. So this really helps to give them more listening practice, and you can test their accuracy that way. All right, next one, tongue twisters. So I did this with my buddy recently because she's practicing the, something and the TH sound. Many of you have mentioned that in the chat. And I would also get her to recite this as in a rhythmical way, that is the same rhythm that we use in English. And so it becomes sort of like a chant and a little bit musical. So whether the weather is cold or whether the weather is hot, we'll weather the weather, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. So there are a lot of ways to use this if we were to be looking today more at stress and intonation and things like that. We're not, but just to know that a tongue twister like this can be used in other ways. And as I mentioned before, you can start, they can start saying it more slowly and then get fast. You even can do it together, and they see that even fluent speakers, we trip up over the words if we start saying them too fast. And just, it brings a bit of humor into the session as well. All right. Here are a few more activities. This is good, especially if you're practicing regular past tense endings. You can ask them to say the past tense of these verbs and listen to see if they know when to add the extra syllable id. So we have ask, 1 syllable, and we've asked, 1 syllable. We have call, 1 syllable, and called. Check, checked. Decide, oh, decided, 3 syllables. And after they go through all of these, let's say we get to, let's try one more with rent. Rent, 1 syllable, rented. Start, 1 syllable, started, 2 syllables. And then I usually will ask my learner to figure out the rule. And after they've done it often enough, they will they may be able to figure this out, that, oh, okay, it seems like whenever the last sound is a d or a t, I need to add that extra syllable id, whereas all the others, they keep the same number of syllables from the present or the infinitive to the past, the simple past. And that's usually a real light bulb moment. It doesn't mean they will automatically add the extra syllable when necessary, but at least they become aware of it. Okay, I want to make sure we have time for our Q&A, so you can look through some of these things later on your own. It's similar things, matching, etc. Asking your learner to record themselves is fantastic. There are so many free apps. They can put it on their phone, or you can record them, and then ask them to listen to themselves. Sometimes it's surprising how much they can detect, and their errors, or they might say, I don't like the way I said that, even though you understood me. I really want to work on that. Let's add that to my goal chart that we do. I think I do mine about once a month with my buddy, and it changes over time, right? It's like, oh, well, I've been practicing those past tense endings a lot now. I want to focus more on the TH sound, for instance. This is great to have them record themselves. And you can also do this over time so that they can go back and listen to themselves and then compare to later recordings. Here are some excellent resources, books, and online resources, some of which we've mentioned, and there are some new ones as well. Okay, and we're almost at the end. Oh, we're at the Q&A time. Okay, so please feel free to unmute. Perhaps you should raise your hand, since we are quite a big group, and we can call on you to ask your question. You also can put something in the chat. And actually, what I'd also really like you to do is, while the Q&A is happening, and I know some of you might need to leave really punctually, please think about something that has sparked your interest in this webinar. I hope that there's been more than one thing, but if you could write that in the chat, something where you think, you know what, I'd like to try that with my buddy the next time we meet, and just see how it goes. If you could write that in the chat, it would be really interesting to see, what kinds of things what kinds of things have sparked your interest in this session today. I usually try to take a couple of ideas from a webinar like this, which is just really too much information to absorb at one time, but I'll try them really soon, because that way I know if it's going to be something I want to really explore and really put in my toolbox, then keep for the longer term, or it's not. And I'll say, well, maybe that wasn't such a great thing. I'm going to try something different. So that's usually what I do with things like this. I just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, I'm going to try all these activities. I love that. Yay. Tongue twisters. Yes, underlining the stressed syllables. So that is extremely important. In the color vowel chart, we have a chart where they start to collect their words in each color, and they underline the stress in every word. Pair of words gains, accent. It's true, accent is part of the interesting character of a person. Really, really important. Decades ago, there were certain kinds of English that were acceptable and certain kinds that weren't, and now it's not like that anymore. Most people who speak English are not native speakers, and there are many, many different kinds of correct English. As long as people understand us, it's good. Let's caption Zoom, you're true. Okay. Thanks for all your participation and comments. Would anyone like to go ahead and ask a question in the session? We do still have 5 minutes, so you're welcome to do that if you'd like. Yes, we will get a copy of the slides. I forgot to mention that at the beginning, I apologize. So when we hear from Margarita in the next day or so, she will send us the link to the slides and the link to the feedback form. The recording will be available in 1 or 2 weeks. Their technical people have to, do something with it. and put it on their YouTube channel. So you will get that, but not, it's not so immediate. Any tips to avoid messing her up? My buddy is in London. Any tips to avoid messing her up with my American pronunciation? That's always interesting. I don't think that it really matters. Whether we say something with a little bit more of an American accent or British accent or Australian. I don't think it really matters as long as most people would understand the way she says it. I mean, if, we have a certain range of English that we can understand, right? So if I use a different word, let's say I use an incorrect word, let's say I use, instead of, like in the UK, they'll say a trolley for a cart at the supermarket. If I say that, people might look at me and sort of in a very puzzled way, like, what did you just say? But if I say cart instead of cart, they're probably going to understand me. So it's much more important. The stress is much more important, and that can vary a little bit sometimes. So instead of garage or garage, it sometimes varies, but often it's the same. So I don't think there should be a big problem with that. Let's see. Will there be an intonation word stress Zoom session in the future? That's a good question. I would suggest that if that would be of interest, and I think it would be a really nice follow-up to this session, you could put it in your feedback form, because Engine's always looking for ideas. And so I would make a note of that there.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Tom. What I do, I use Zoom, and I turn on record. I put it in the cloud, and then she can look at it and I can look at it. She likes it because she hears me speak. I like it because I can hear her speak and go. Then we ask questions afterwards. The second thing I just started using today was closed caption. It has to be configured on your host, but if you have it, you can see the English at the bottom of the screen. And that is useful when she can't understand what I'm saying. She sees that and says, oh, or sometimes I have a hard time understanding her accent, but it does a good job. So I look at it, I go, oh, is that what she said? So that's my tips.
Those are great ideas, Tom. Thanks for sharing that. Yes, recording the Zoom is always a good idea. I haven't done that with my buddy. It's something I probably should ask her, but I do often do it with my students, because, as you say, once a week is not that much. And if they want to, hear it again and maybe even do a sort of listen and repeat, we'd have to talk about that, more about that in another session. But it can be used becomes a resource for them to practice from week to week. So it's an excellent idea to do that, and as is the caption idea. Thank you. We still have a couple more minutes. Any last thoughts that anyone would like to share?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. I had my hand raised, but I guess you didn't see it.
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I have a beginner, and I really enjoy speaking to her twice a week. I go and we have a Zoom session. She has asked me, because she likes crossword puzzles, and I know that's really not spoken English, but I think what she's trying to do is increase her vocabulary. And so I have sent her crossword puzzles, but I have to stick to real simple ones because she's a beginner. So yes. I've been using like children's crossword puzzles, but she also wanted to listen to the spoken word, and apparently it's too expensive to buy Audible books. I know there are some there for ESL students, but they're expensive. Is there any resource that I can send her a link so she can listen to the books?
Well, for books, nothing comes to mind quickly, especially for a beginner. But you could show her this site that's free, and they have different levels. And it's fairly self-explanatory. I'll just put that up in the chat. There are ways to practice reading and pronunciation and vocabulary building with that link.
So YouTube or
No, it's eslfast.com.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right, so it's time for us to finish off, unless there are any last minute questions or comments. Oh, here's someone's posting something with short stories, so we can all look at that. That's a wonderful thing about having a large group. You all have so much knowledge to share with each other, and we can continue to learn. So, Margarita, she'll be saving these links, and so perhaps we can use some of your resources to share in future webinars. So I think I would just like to end again by thanking you so much for being here today and for your active participation. And I do hope that you got something out of it, and that this will be useful. Look forward to seeing your feedback, and I also hope to see you at a future webinar. Thanks so much again, and thank you especially to Margarita for being with us in the middle of the night in Ukraine. I really appreciate your tech support, Margarita, and for putting this presentation together for us. Thank you. So I'll say have a good evening or a good morning or wherever you are, and see you next time. Bye.